Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here today. My name is Billy Lau. I am a research scientist from Georgia Institute of Technology. Today, together with my colleagues Yonjing Zhang and Cheng Yu Song, we are going to be presenting our work entitled Mactans, Injecting Malware into iOS Devices via Malicious Charges. So Mactans is basically encapsulates a small portion of our findings in a larger security research in mobile security research that is done in Georgia Tech Information Security Center, better known as GTIS. So why don't we get started? Here is the agenda for today. Basically, the talk will be partitioned into three sections, beginning with the iOS security. In this section, I will talk about the overview of iOS security and a deeper analysis of what it is. And then we will go into the introduction of Mactans. That is a proof of concept attack that we've developed, which allows us to basically install these malicious applications. And then we'll end with discussions beginning from the observations that were made during the process of research and also the potential countermeasures that we have proposed, and also what we have seen implemented, what countermeasures that we have seen implemented in the newest release of iOS 7 beta. So now to begin, let's start with the overview of an iOS security. Now, before I go further, let me get started with a few terms that I'll be using throughout. So I'll be using, number one, the term apps to refer to applications, programs that users install on their iPhones or iDevices. And as I mentioned, iDevices, I will be using this term instead of particularly iPhones or iPad because it's a more general term. Now, in the research of iOS security, we deal with a lot of assumptions and basically challenging these assumptions as we find them. And here the question today is how secure are iOS devices? And how do we relate these assumptions to everyday user, in particular like activities like answering the phones, making calls or sending SMSs, to very mundane activities like even charging their phone, which every user must do, we presume. And then we raise the question of other ways to basically challenge this security assumption besides jailbreaking the devices. So I want you to keep in mind these questions, and hopefully you'll find the answers to these by the end of these questions by the end of our talk. So we begin our analysis from the Apple App Store. The Apple App Store, in a nutshell, is a very critical piece in this whole ecosystem on iOS security. And the reason is that it helps Apple to enforce this model called the walled garden model. Basically, what this model means is that no arbitrary person should be able to install arbitrary app on any arbitrary iDevice. So in this context, Apple App Store is very important. From the developer's point of view, it is the platform, the only platform to publish apps. And from the user's point of view, it is the only place to purchase or download apps. Now, needless to say, this Apple App Store is completely owned and controlled by Apple. Therefore, the integrity during the app review process should not come as a question. Now, all apps that is submitted must be reviewed by Apple prior to release. But the caveat is that even though the app may have gone through an initial release, approved for release, it could still be removed from the store retroactively should Apple find this app to violate its policy sometime in the future. Now with this, we raise another question. The question is then, how does Apple enforce this policy that no arbitrary person should be able to download arbitrary app and run it? What if me as a user, I want to download an app and run it? The simple answer to that is through something called the mandatory code signing process. Basically, the code signing process enforces the integrity all the way from the hardware, the device itself, to going up in in the software stack to the bootloader, the operating systems, and eventually the apps. Basically, so this means that only apps that have correct digital signature can be installed and executed on iDevices. Now the question, who can sign this apps? No doubt, of course, only Apple can sign this. But during our process of research, we discovered that there is a potential channel which can be exploited, and this is the other entity that who can actually sign apps is the iOS developers themselves. Now, then who can become iOS developers? Again, during our research process, what we did was we go to the Apple's development portal and request to be developers. We submit our credentials, names, address, and credit card numbers, and we will be billed. I think it's $99, and then a few hours after that, we approve, and voila, I'm already an iOS developer. So what this means as a consequence is that now I am able to sign any arbitrary app and then run arbitrary app on any iDevice. So I want you to first keep in mind of this point as we continue to review the Apple walled garden model. So conventionally, when a developer is done developing his app, he will submit it to the App Store and goes through a review process. During this review process, Apple will attempt to determine whether or not this app pass or fail based on many criteria, rules and regulations. Naturally, the question is, what then are the rules? Unfortunately, although there is an official list that Apple publishes on guidelines that what constitutes a good or approved apps, it is completely open for interpretation and at Apple's discretion. So the best we can do is to examine, based on our experience, apps that has been previously banned or rejected from the App Store. And what we found out is that apps that make use of private APIs are rejected and banned. And also these rules are probably changing very regularly. In a more technical sense, what happens during the app review is we think Apple deploys static analysis to check whether or not these private APIs are called in your app, and also deploy some manual testing where a real user installs this device during the review process and actually clicks through. And through a very empirical process, then they will approve or reject the app. Now, having that said, if your app managed to pass the review process, your app is now being submitted, can be published through the App Store. Any user then can go to the App Store by launching the App Store app from his or her iDevice and then search for the associated app that he wants. However, after installation, during the execution, the app that is installed is still confined in some way. And this confinement is called the iOS sandbox. Basically, the iOS sandbox provides two types of isolation. Number one, process isolation. Number two, file system isolation. So what is process isolation? Process isolation is when, for example, a particular app A cannot read, is not allowed to read any other app's memory region. And it also cannot talk to any other process using the traditional IPC-like APIs. So as you can see, this way, the intercommunications between apps is very limited. And as for file system isolation, what the protection it brings is that if I have app A installs a particular, saves a particular file onto disk, any other app on the installed on the iDevice cannot read, or it doesn't even know about the existence of this file. Now, there is some caveat. Although there is a certain region in the iOS file system that is publicly readable, but it is strictly read-only. This means that no modifications, therefore there does not exist communication channel. So from the standpoint of the iOS sandbox, it provides a protection where even an app that is installed cannot easily attack another app on the system. So this is in contrary to traditional platforms like PCs where such attacks can happen more easily. And there's another interesting aspect of iOS runtime in the sandbox is that iOS runtime performs entitlement check. So what are entitlements? You can view entitlements as special privileges or permissions to access certain sensitive resources. In this context, examples of entitlements are like access to, if your app wants access to iCloud, if your app wants to do push notification or change passcode. So iOS strictly enforces this app entitlement during runtime. If you do not have this declared and approved, you don't have such entitlement. So with this knowledge in mind now, we are ready to go back to the question we posed earlier on the effectiveness of Apple's walled garden model. So now, the walled garden model is assumed to be secure because all apps are carefully vetted before it is being released and downloaded, and therefore it is safe, right? And to its credit, compared to Android, there really is almost no in the wild malware instances for iOS that we know of. However, do keep in mind that about the additional channel that I've mentioned just now, where I talk about the iOS developers. This basically creates a channel for iOS developers to sideload any apps onto the iDevice, and this is exactly what the idea of Mactans is about. And now I shall guide you through step-by-step introductions to Mactans. Basically, Mactans challenges the very fundamental assumptions that security assumptions that people make when they are performing their day-to-day tasks. In particular, charging the devices and using the devices when it is being charged. Because Mactans exactly leverages this to basically exploit the weaknesses that we find in order to then install arbitrary malicious apps. So conceptually, let's answer a few questions of what Mactans is and what Mactans is not. So I must really emphasize, what makes Mactans unique is that firstly, it is not a jailbreak. It does not require the target device to be jailbroken before Mactans attack can happen. Neither does it cause the phone to be jailbroken after Mactans attack has happened. And the attack is very automatic. Simply connecting the device to the Mactans charger, the attack is done. And during the Mactans attack, it's very stealthy. Basically, if the user were to even look at a screen, there's no visible cues that something suspicious is going on. Excuse me. Last but not least, Mactans delivers a very powerful attack because unlike conventional, traditional way of downloading an app from the App Store, Mactans the arbitrary apps that Mactans installs onto the target device can really does malicious things that other apps cannot do. And we shall all see this in a short video demo throughout this talk later. So with this concept, we have basically implemented a prototype with a BeagleBoard, as you can see here on the screen. We've chosen the BeagleBoard largely because it is open source and it is commercially available. So this shows that such an attack has a very low low entry barrier. And as you can see there, BeagleBoard comes with a USB port, which will then becomes the interface to plug in the USB to Lightning cable, and then user will use it to charge the device. Now, for a moment, you may think that this does not look at all like the Apple's original charger, but this is, I would say that please do not be fixated with the form, because as you can see here, there's so many other forms of basically mini computers that can be so much smaller. In fact, with today's technology, the system-on-chip technology, we can fabricate chips with processing x86 processing powers with the size of only the size of the tip of your finger, index finger. So really, size is not a matter. We just chose that because of a short time constraint and small financial budget. Now, with that in mind, let me first guide you through a high-level overview of what happens when a user has connected his or her device onto a Mactans charger. So number one, Mactans will immediately obtain a device UDID. With the device UDID, it will then generate an appropriate provisioning profile. Then it waits for an opportunity to pair with the device. Once the pairing is done, it will then install the generated provisioning profile. After the provisioning profile has been successfully installed, then Mactans can install arbitrary malicious app that it wants. So now to cover these terms that mentions UDID, provisioning profile, and so on, my colleague Yonjing will take over to go into further details.
Hello, audiences. My name is Yongjin Zhang, and I will talk about the technical details of the Mactans attack. And the first step of the Mactans attack is getting UDID. UDID, as it stands for Universal Device Identifier, it is a unique identifier for distinguishing an iDevices. And Apple uses this UDID for registering a device to a certain developer's license for a development purpose. So it is quite sensitive information because if anyone can get this one, then he can register someone's device for a development device. But however, the obtaining of the UDID is quite trivial. We don't know the reason, but Apple exposed this UDID as a USB serial number. So right after the connecting with the USB cable, it is automatically sent to the USB host as a USB device description header. So that anyone can get this number by connecting it and just typing ls USB, it will print out the UDID. And next step is pair with the device. To interact with the iDevice through the USB connection, the Mactans is required to be paired with the device. So once it is connected, Mactans will try to pair with it. And this pairing step is for exchanging session key, which is used for encrypting the further communication. And on this pairing, we leverage two weaknesses. One thing is, on this pairing, the iDevices do not do any authentication of the USB host that initiates this pairing. So if the devices are available for the pairing, then any USB host initiates the pairing, then they cannot reject it. And also, it does not ask for the user's permission, or it does not giving any visual indication for this pairing. But there's one protection mechanism for this pairing. That is, the pairing can only be done when the device is passcode unlocked. But every iDevices are shipped with without the passcode in default. In that case, if it is connected with the Mactans, then it will be automatically paired and Mactans can launch the attack. Or for a more general case, if the device is set with the passcode, then if that device is passcode unlocked and connected with the Mactans, then it will be automatically paired. Or it is connected while it is locked, but the user unlocks it for the replying for the SMS or replying for the Facebook message, then it will be automatically paired. So another weakness comes in at this stage. Once it is paired, the connection will remain permanently and that can be used whether or not the device is locked. So if Mactans can get any moment of pairing while it is charging, then the pairing is done and Mactans can launch the attack. So for preventing the Mactans attack, the only way is to, before the charging, to keep the devices locked and plug it and put the device locked entire of the time of the charging. Then Mactans cannot do the pairing, then it will not do the attack. After the pairing, Mactans can do anything that can be done through the USB connection. And simply, it is what the iTunes or Xcode can do. So for example, Mactans can get some device information, or install and removing apps and provisioning profiles, and backup and restore, or we can also do the debugging. But for Mactans attack, we specifically exploit the second feature, install and removing apps and provisioning profile, to inject our own signed code to the device. And next is a description of the provisioning profile. So in the iOS framework, there are some entities who requires execution on the device, execution of their code on the device without Apple's involvement. They are individual developers or some enterprise who has the proprietary application and who wants the in-house distribution. And to allow them to run the code on the device, Apple introduced this provisioning profile. And to get this provisioning profile, we need the active developer's license and the UDID of the device. And we need internet connection. I will describe more why we need those things. So to allow the devices to run the developer-signed code under the mandatory code signing policy of the iOS devices, Apple uses this provisioning profile. Basically, it binds a list of devices to a certain developer's license, and then it will be digitally signed by Apple to follow up the certificate, the trust chain. So existence of the provisioning profile means that Apple has allowed to the certain developer run their signed code on specified devices. So for example, in my iPhone, which is used for the iOS app development, it has a bunch of the provisioning profiles, and it is also signed by Apple. And only after installing those provisioning profile, I can run my application on the device. And in the provisioning profile, devices are registered with the UDID. So that's why we need to grab the UDID at the first stage. And the registration of the device can be done through the developers portal, developers.apple.com website. So Mactans needs the internet connection to get this file, to generate this file and get this signed by Apple. However, we believe that it is not that hard to get an internet connection for a charger like a Mactans. For example, if there's a free Wi-Fi connection, Mactans can use it. Or if there's a weak keyed, the encrypted connection, then Mactans can hack it. Or with the advanced system on chip technology, we can ship with the SIM card. We can ship Mactans with the SIM card. Then it can freely use the cellular network connection, which is available anywhere in these days. And with the available internet connection, getting up this provisioning profile can easily be automated. And let's see what is the common way to get the provisioning profile. I found this question and answer on the Stack Overflow, which is the well-known developers community. And the one guy is asking about, he has the device and have the UDID, but he don't have the physical access to the device, and he need to get the provisioning profile. And the answer is, log on to the provisioning portal and type some UDID and select something and click generate. So it just requires the logon credential and typing UDID and few clicks. And it can be easily automated by the browser automated automating tools. So we use the Selenium, which is well known, and it's really easy. And once the provisioning profile is obtained, then it can be installed through the connection that we established at the prior pairing step. And during the installation, iDevices do not ask about the user's permission for installing, or it does not give any visual indication when it is installing on the device. And also, after installing the provisioning profile, now we can inject arbitrary app that is signed by our own developer's license. And also, on installing the installing application, it does not ask user for installing permission. However, unlike with the jailbreak attack, Mactans attack do not give the root privilege. So if we install the application on the device, then it will be shown on the springboard, which is the main screen of the iOS devices, and it is still under the sandbox protection, so it has a runtime limitation. So to make this Mactans attack to be meaningful and it to be stealthy, we need to go to some further steps like hide the app to prevent unwanted deletion, and we need to circumvent runtime restrictions. Let's start with the hiding an app. For hiding an app, actually, there already exist some hidden apps on every stock iDevices. So for example, the demo app.app and field test.app, it is already existing on the iOS devices, but user might not see it. Because, excuse me, yeah. So we look into the common things of those apps, and we look into some metadata, which called the info.plist, and there is the key SBF tags and value hidden. By setting this property as a hidden, it will make the app will not shown on the springboard, and it will not shown on the task manager too. So user might not see our injected app if we set these flags. And another, to completely hide the app, we need to hide the execution too. So many people believe that in the iOS devices, there is no background service available. However, that's not true. And in default, Apple allows 10-minute limits for the background service for every applications. 10-minute limit can be short, but by searching for the developers community for a short time, I found a two easy way to circumvent this limitation. So one way is if we terminate background execution before reaching the 10-minute limit and spawn the background thread again, then iOS framework will extend the limit to another 10 minutes. Or if we set our app as a VoIP application, then we can set a callback function called the set keep alive timeout. And if we set it as a 600 second, which is 10 minutes, and it will be called every 10 minutes, then we can spawn a new background thread again and again. With this method, we can make our app can run indefinitely on the device. Now we can hide the app and the execution. Then what hidden app can do? So unlike with the jailbreak attack, we do not have the root privilege and we are still under the sandbox. But there is one advantage we can take it. That is, we can freely call the private API. Private API is an undocumented API on the iOS framework, and calling up this prohibited through the Apple's review process. However, in the Mactans attack, there is no such limitation because there's no review process. We are just injecting our app through the USB communication. Yeah. So we found that two interesting things on exploiting private API. And one thing is taking a screenshot. By running this code on the screen, a background thread can take a screenshot of the current foreground window. And as everybody knows, in the iOS framework, whenever a user types a password on the password form, it will show the last character user typed in for verify their typing. So if we take a screenshot whenever touch comes in, then our app can steal the password by character. Yeah. And another interesting thing is that the screenshot is a passive attack. For an active attack, we can actually simulate the touch and the physical button press event. It is actually intended for the Xcode for the developers to do the automated user testing, and this capability is stored at the UI automation framework, which is on the developer's disk, and that is shipped with the Xcode. But if we just grab that UI automation.framework file and ship it to our payload application, then we can simulate the touch without the Xcode. So there are a list of the APIs, available APIs, and there is a send tab and some point. So we can actually generate the touch event at the screen coordinate, or it has the click lock, click menu, and click volume up. So we can also click the physical button press event. So previously from the screenshot, we have the eye of the user, and with the touch event, we have the hand of the user. So our hidden app can everything what user can do. Now we install the app and we know what to do. Then how can we execute this payload at the first time? So we introduce a method to make it as a Trojan. So instead of hiding our payload app, we decided to hide some famous and frequently running and already existing on the target device. For example, Facebook or Skype. So at first time of the attack, we removed the existing Facebook application on the device. And we repackaged the Facebook application with the SB attack hidden flag and install it to the device. Then that original Facebook application will be installed, but will not be shown anywhere on the user's device. And then we make our payload set name as a Facebook, and we extract the icon from the Facebook and wrap it to our payload. Then user will see same icon, same name as a Facebook, but user will execute our payload. So the workflow of the Trojan horse is follows. So on the leftmost figure, there's a Facebook application. So there's no visual difference with the original Facebook application, but it is actually a Trojan. And whenever user launches it, our Trojan comes up and it will immediately calls original Facebook application through the custom URL, the API, which is provided by the iOS app framework. And then original Facebook application comes to front, and finally user will see the Facebook application. So user will have no suspicions while the Trojan is executing on the background. And we prepared the video clip for showing the whole step of the Mactans attack. So let's watch it. So this is a Mactans charger. It is built with the Beagle board, and we made the fancy case with the 3D printer. Yeah, it has a power cable and SD card for operating system and some data, and there is a lightning cable which will be connected to the iPhone devices. Yeah. And then there's an iPhone device, and we reset this device to the factory state and just set the passcode. And let's look, so there's no installed application, and let's look into the device information. So version of the operating system is 6.1.4, so it is not a jailbroken device, and there's no pre-installed provisioning profiles. So it is a pristine state and just set it with the passcode. And to simulate the scenario, we will install the Facebook application from the App Store, and it is the original Facebook application. So it is downloading and installing the Facebook app. How it takes a long time. Yeah, now it is installed and executed. And it's just an original Facebook application. Yeah. So user can log in and use the Facebook. Yeah. There's no Trojan at this time. Yeah. And let's start. So user will see that there's a low battery, and he will decide to charge with Mactans, which is a bad choice. Yeah. Yeah. Now connect with the USB cable. Yeah. It is charging, and at this time the pairing cannot be happened because it is passcode locked. But if the user got some SMS message, or if user wants to do web surfing while charging, user will unlock the phone. Then Mactans attack can start it at this point. Since the paired connection can be permanently available, whether or not the device is locked, the Mactans attack can continuously launch even though the device is locked. And while Mactans installing the provisioning profile and the application, there's no visual indication of the installing. Yeah. So it is look like just a regular charging. Yeah. And for the whole process of the attack, it generally takes less than 1 minute. But in this case, since the Facebook app is quite large, you saw that the installing from the App Store takes a long time. So installation of the Facebook takes like 40 to 50 seconds, and install of the payload takes 5 to 10 seconds. So the overall, the installing of the whole step takes around 80 seconds. So we will open up the target iPhone after the 80 seconds has been passed. So yeah, let's try to open the iPhone. So unplug it and unlock the phone. And then there's no difference. Attack has happened, but user might not feel like there's any differences because that payload is actually same as the Facebook application. So firstly, it launches Trojan, and it launches Facebook application. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And since the original Facebook application is hidden on the task manager, there's only one Facebook application is shown, and it is actually Trojan. And original Facebook application is not on the Springboard, and it is not on the task manager too. Yeah. And we set the payload to do something after user locks the screen. And let's see what will be happen. Yeah. So there's no hand at all. It unlocks, types a passcode. Yeah. And it will make a phone call to the phone right next to them. Yeah. Typing the phone number, calling. Yeah. Yeah, actually phone rings. Yeah. Yeah, this is Mactans attack. Yeah. And I will pass the mic to the Billy to sum up the attacks, talking about the attack scenarios.
So Ladies and gentlemen, after you've seen how Mactans can take place in real life, let's discuss about some attack scenarios. So we can think about the deployment of Mactans in a very general setting, especially in public spaces like airports or libraries. I'm sure you've seen these USB outlets in airports, and for those who are staying in the conference hotel, I'm sure that you've also noticed that they also provide these USB outlets to charge. So these are actually the prime targets that adversary can deploy Mactans. So the first case is for a general purpose, casting a wide net. In the second scenario, it's more of a targeted attack, where I want to put into perspective scenarios like espionage, where the adversary is very highly funded, probably at a state level. So there's no question of the ability to be able to fabricate the charger that looks exactly the same, feels way exactly the same, but it's actually a Mactans charger capable of injecting arbitrary malicious apps that you have seen just now. So from the adversary standpoint, he or she just needs to exchange the original charger with the Mactans charger, and then after that, the game is over. So for further discussions, I will now pass the time to Cheng Yu.
Okay, now let's discuss some problems we found during this research and some proposed potential countermeasures. So problem number 1, incorrect trust model for pairing. So the current trust model used by iOS is that any host is implicitly trusted if the device is not passcode locked. However, as we have shown in our attack, the host can be malicious. It can be a Mactans charger or simply be a PC or Mac infected with malware that also can infect iOS device. And a minor problem with pairing, as we already mentioned, is once the pairing is done, it's permanent. So more specifically, after the key exchange has finished, the host can continue talking to the device even if the device is passcode locked again. This can be dangerous in 2 ways. First, it only requires one very quick unlock during the charger for a malicious host to compromise the device, as we have demonstrated. And second, if the private key associated with the trusted certificate that the device already accepts is stolen by attacker, the attacker can reuse this private key to communicate with the device without further pairing. So to fix this problem, we propose the device should explicitly ask a user to authorize the pairing. In fact, after we report this weakness to Apple, Apple invited us to evaluate what has become the new iOS 7 Beta 2. And during the examination, we noticed Apple has added a new feature. That is, when you connect the device to a new host, iOS 7 will pop up window and ask the user whether this host is trusted or not. And to fix the permanent pairing problem, we suggest all mobile operating systems should add some kind of management functionality to allow users to manage trusted hosts. They can be in a similar form in the desktop OS, like managing your Wi-Fi connections. So problem number 2, there's no visual difference for different connection states. In fact, there is only one notification icon for iOS now, and it's for synchronization. So it will only show up when you are doing backup and restore. It will not show up when Mactans tries to install the provisioning profile. It will not show up when it tries to install the Trojan app, and it will not show up when we tries to do some debugging. So this is the primary reason why our attack is very stealthy. So the fix for problem number 2, we suggest adding more indicate we suggest we adding more notification to indicate what is happening on the device. Note the fix for problem number 1 already partially fixed the problem, because right now if you plug an iOS 7 device into Mactans charger, you will immediately notice there's something wrong, because the charger should never ask for pairing. But as the host can also be PC, this does not solve the whole problem. So we suggest, for example, could add in different icons for different connection states, one for synchronization, one for app installation, and one for debugging. And it would also be better to include some mechanism similar to Android, where when you have a new installed app or updated a new app, there will be a notification in the notification center telling what has happened. So problem number 3, provisioning profile abusing. So while each app has to go through a very strict review process to get signed, the provisioning profile signing functionality is not well guarded. For this reason, Mactans charging can automatically generate a provisioning profile for the target device on the fly. So to fix this problem, we suggest adding additional procedures to stop this kind of abusing. For example, a capped chart can be added to stop automatic provisioning profile generation, and the better abnormal detection mechanism can be deployed to detect suspicious behavior, such as adding large amount of UDID to a provisioning profile. Although this cannot prevent targeted attack, we think it can be helpful to stop large-scale malware infection. Problem number 4, over-privileged default capability for USB. So as already mentioned, the USB can be used to obtain the device information. It can be also used to install and remove apps and provisioning profiles. It can be used to perform backup and restore, and even firmware reset. It is also used for debugging. So among these capabilities, we think those two related to development, namely installing the provisioning profile and debugging, is the most dangerous one, because without the ability to automatically install the provisioning profile, our attack won't succeed. And with the capability of debugging, you guys can come up with all different kinds of creative attacks. So to fix this problem, we suggest reducing the default capability of USB. For example, installing the provisioning profile should ask the user for authorize. This can be done similar to how you ask the user to whether to trust the host or not for pairing. And the debug mode should never be able to turn on through USB. So in fact, Android does a better job in this scenario, because to turn on the debug mode on Android phone, the developer has to manually touch the version information 7 times before the menu even shows up. So problem number 5, the hidden app property. So during our research, we found this property is only used by a few apps of Apple's own, or maybe from the carrier. So we think it's of few or non-legitimate use for third-party apps, but it has very high abuse potential. And the fix for this problem can be easy. Apple can make this an entitlement and restrict it to be used by Apple's own app, similar to how Apple restricts the code generation entitlements to mobile Safari only. So before ending, one more thing. In this talk, we have demonstrated how we can leverage the USB protocol and the personal developing account to inject malware into any device. However, this is not the only way. In the coming Usenik security conference, our colleague will present how a malicious app can bypass app review process and get distributed through the official app store. Thank you. Please fill up your feedback form. Your feedback is very important to us.